How we doing? How we doing? This is Destination Denver, Colorado, and I get it. You're thinking about moving to Colorado Springs in 2022. You need to know the pros, the cons, the likes, the nots. I'm going to cover all of them starting right now. All right, this is Destination Denver, Colorado. I am your host, Jimmy Everts, and listen, if you're interested in learning all the ins and outs, pros and cons to moving to or around Denver, Colorado, then this is a channel for you. So that subscribe button and notification icon popping up, make sure you click on that to be notified as I'm dropping new videos for you each and every week. And as much as I enjoy getting out on a randomly cloudy Colorado day, we don't get very many of those, I enjoy even more being a resource for you for your potential move to Denver. So as a licensed mortgage expert covering the entire state, teamed up with some of the state's most talented real estate agents, the number and email popping up below, I'm always the person answering your calls, answering your texts, answering your emails, there when and if you need me. Now that we have that fun-filled stuff out of the way, let's get to what we're here for, and that is you're thinking about making the move. Colorado Springs might be the destination in 2022. What do I need to know? Let's dive into it. All right, so let's start with just some general basics of Colorado Springs, which happens to be the second largest city in the state of Colorado. Currently, its population sits a little over 482,000, but it is growing rapidly. They've seen about a 9% increase in population over the last 12 months, and especially since COVID started in 2020, between remote workers and some different developments, Colorado Springs has certainly become more of a hotspot and a destination for people coming to Colorado or even just getting out of the city of Denver. So one of the things that makes Colorado Springs really desirable for people who have even those that are already living in Colorado is the fact that it's 4.5% more expensive than the national average, but that is relatively cheap when you think about Colorado and certainly in comparison to Denver. The median income in Colorado Springs sits right around $54,000, whereas you're going to be closer to 80, 85 up here in Denver. And the average median, almost said average, median home price down in Colorado Springs sits right at $411,000 as of the making of this video. Now, as I will always tell you, median can kind of drive me nuts. Again, we're talking the middle number, not the average, but that's what real estate likes to work off of. That's what I'm going to tell you, $411,000. Now, over the last decade, Colorado Springs has seen plenty of appreciation on their real estate, but one scary stat to throw out is that over the last 12 months, Colorado Springs has seen a 25% appreciation on average for their real estate. That is bonkers. But there's a lot of reasons for people moving down to Colorado Springs. Obviously, you have the Air Force Academy. That's what the area is probably best known for, at least on a national level. And school systems are very popular down there. On average, Colorado Springs spends about 10 grand per student. It's a little less than 10 grand. And there's on average 16 students to every one teacher. So pretty solid in that regard, and it gets pretty good reviews based on the people living locally in Colorado Springs. And as you start to talk about Colorado Springs, you certainly have to mention how much sunshine it gets, because after all, if you're talking about anything related to Colorado, we got to talk about sunshine. We like to talk about it a lot. Denver sees just under 300 days a year of sunshine. Well, Colorado Springs, they get a little bump. They're up at average around 330 days of sunshine a year. Now, granted, you might get some clouds here and there, but that's pretty solid. 330 out of 365, not bad. At the same time, one thing I've always noticed when I get down to Colorado Springs is that it's a lot windier there than it is in Denver, and that's for pretty good reason. While you do have mountains to the western side of Colorado Springs, Denver's like kind of tucked. It's not a mountain town, but Denver's kind of tucked right up against the Rockies, cuts down on the wind quite a bit, whereas Colorado Springs, not so much. You get a lot of that wind. At the same time, Denver sees far more snow on average than Colorado Springs will. Colorado Springs, even though it's about an hour 15, hour 30 south of Denver, it has definitely a warmer climate as you get down that way. I always feel like I have a tone as I finish some sentences. I think it goes back to my broadcast journalism days where I end with like a news reporter reading the end of a line. I'm going to apologize for that up front. And so because of this weather and all the sunshine, Colorado Springs is great for lifestyle. That's one of the biggest aspects of that. If you're into hiking, biking, kayaking, getting outside, camping. Colorado Springs is going to have a lot of that part. Again, you go back to how nice the weather is, how much sun you get. It is dry. It's a very dry climate, similar to Denver in that way, but even drier so. Not a lot of water to speak of. Enough river-wise, there's some places, great places to kayak that I enjoy, but certainly not a place where you're gonna go to the beach and hang out for the day. But man, if you're into hiking and biking, you can't really beat Colorado Springs. So Colorado Springs is also home to some pretty unique and pretty cool things. First, I would talk about Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, which is the local zoo in Colorado Springs, is commonly ranked on the national scale. Like, I have to admit, I didn't really think about Colorado Springs for their zoo until some friends brought me down there, and it's an excellent zoo, and again, very popular. The second thing is that the Olympic and Paralympic committees are down there, their training facilities are down there, their museum is down there. So Colorado Springs is kind of nicknamed Olympic City, USA. Again, of all the places in the nation, Colorado Springs is huge on the Olympic front, both summer and winter. A lot of athletes will come here to train. Big reason for that is the fact that Colorado Springs is about 6,200 feet above sea level, so you get that altitude, helps with the training, helps make you a better athlete. Plus you're just around Colorado, which makes you better. I'm a little biased. What do you want from me? And the last thing, it's something kind of personal. You know, got a lot of peeps and a history with the fire department. So the Fallen Firefighter Memorial is also located down in Colorado Springs. So every year they have a huge event, thousands of people attend, in which they add the names of fallen firefighters from that year to a wall of respect and honor. And it's just, you know, obviously an event that is heartfelt, but and when you see it, there is nothing like it. The bagpipes, the respect that firefighters give each other is on another. I don't point to myself for that, but I mean the respect that firefighters give each other as a brotherhood. Coming from a military background, I can't even compare. I've never seen anything like it, and it's definitely something that the people of Colorado Springs truly embrace. Colorado Springs is also home to the Broadmoor Hotel, which is one of the cooler, though humbly I'm going to say somewhat outdated hotels in all of the nation. It's the type of place that celebrities have gone to, former presidents have stayed in. It's a beautiful hotel, great pond out in the middle of its courtyard. Definitely a place to check out. And I am a terrible golfer, but their golf course is pretty popular as well. On a personal note, I'm going to bring up the Bear Creek Dog Park, which I found because I grew up next to a place called Bear Creek. So when I saw it, I had to check it out. And who doesn't like dog parks? Because again, if you're coming to Colorado and you don't like dogs, cancel the trip. And finally, you have Garden of the Gods, which is one of the prettier places you're going to go see. Great place for hiking, biking, spending some time with your family, gorgeous outdoor rock formations, a beautiful area. So obviously Colorado Springs has a lot of things going for it. It does have some drawbacks, some random ones, if you will. One, when it comes to homeowners insurance and car insurance, Colorado Springs tends to be one of the more expensive places on a national average for insurance. It's a high-risk area. Big for hail. There have been fires in the past. It's very dry. That's not to say that people are at risk all the time, but from an insurance standpoint, it tends to be on the high end. Second negative I would give you is altitude sickness is real, and so is the power of the sun because you're closer to it. So you're going to get burnt faster in Colorado Springs, and the altitude can throw a lot of people off at first. I think you assimilate to it pretty quickly, but be aware of that as you get into town. Denver, it's going to be similar, but Colorado Springs, another 1,000 feet plus in altitude. Be aware of that, and altitude can definitely mess with some people. And then the last thing as far as negatives that I would mention is that, and this is just me, I haven't spent a ton of time in Colorado Springs, but the streets can be a little confusing. So Colorado Springs doesn't exactly operate off of a grid system the way that some cities that we have come from do. It also has some random one-way streets. So some of them kind of curve, or you have a random one-way going this way. So it's kind of easy to get, I don't want to say lost, but definitely off course a bit, especially in like old town Colorado Springs. You'll see it a lot until you get familiar with it. Lord knows, once you've driven around the town, it's not huge. You'll get used to it quick, but man, in the short term, some of those one-way streets, they'll throw you off a little bit. And obviously, if you're thinking about moving down to Colorado Springs, you're going to think about some of the more popular neighborhoods. Briargate, very popular community. Broadmoor, not just for the hotel, but for the community surrounding it. Black Forest, I would probably put number 3, although you could put it 1 or 2. That's a great neighborhood. And the last one, I'm just gonna spell and I'm gonna put up in a lower third at the bottom of the screen, because if I mispronounce the name, Rockrimmon, locals are gonna hear it and they're gonna be like, don't listen to this guy, he doesn't know how to say a word. But I kind of feel like this community is a lot like places out in Massachusetts, right? You ever heard of Worcester? No. You read a map, it says like Worcester, right? Worcester. That's what Colorado Springs did when they named Rockrimmon. Rock, paper, scissors. And one of the kind of cool things about Colorado Springs and those different neighborhoods is that Colorado Springs has choice schools. So that means that you don't have to live right next to or in the same community as the school that you want to send your kids. You can choose the school that you would like to send them to. So as you're checking out those cool neighborhoods, understand that you have some flexibility as far as schools. And remember, bringing it full circle, Colorado Springs, pretty solid in education, because I mean, you get 16, 17 kids per teacher. Unless I'm in your class, because I'm a hoodlum, those teachers are going to be able to pay attention to your kid. So certainly Colorado Springs has its pros, it has its cons. It has become an extremely popular destination. I can't emphasize that enough. Part of the reason, you're far enough from Denver where if you really need to get up here, you can, but you get a ton more affordability being that hour 15, hour 30 south of Denver. Do I know plenty of people that are living in the Springs and working in Denver? I mean, that is getting fewer and far between. I think most people that are living in the Springs are either working there, working remote, or if they are working in Denver, they're working in the southern part. They're working down in the Tech Center, Denver Tech Center. They're working down in Castle Rock, which is itself about 30 minutes south of Denver. So something to consider. And being a former military person, I mentioned the Air Force Academy is there. Colorado Springs is one of the highest ranked places for veterans and military people to move to. The community is obviously very well known for being around the military, understanding the military, supporting the military. They've got some great memorials, they've got some great benefits. So if you happen to be a veteran moving out to Colorado, you could do a lot worse than Colorado Springs. Of course, every good conversation about Colorado Springs leads to another, so that's a perfect opportunity for you to reach out and hit up that phone number or that email address popping up below, because I'm always the person answering your calls, answering your texts, answering your emails. Would love to be a resource for you in your view of moving to or around Denver, Colorado. This is Destination Denver, Colorado. I am your host, Jimmy Everts. This has been Moving to Colorado Springs in 2022. Until I see you again, peace.